In the vast and unforgiving wilderness of Kamchatka, 2008 became a year etched into memory as one of the most terrifying chapters in its history. Nature, in its rawest form, showed how fragile human existence can be when placed against the fury of a predator whose hunger knew no limits. That summer, the delicate balance of life in the region was disrupted. The salmon, the lifeblood of the brown bear's diet, had grown unusually scarce. This single shift in the rhythm of nature pushed the largest predator of the northern forests to a desperate edge. And when hunger took hold, it was not the rivers they turned to, nor the smaller prey of the taiga, but to man himself. In July, more than 30 brown bears began to linger around a geological camp. At first, their behavior was unsettling, but not immediately catastrophic. They prowled silently at the edges of the camp, their noses twitching as they searched for scraps. The workers inside the camp watched nervously as these enormous creatures rummaged through garbage piles, overturned cans, and sniffed the wooden fences. The bears were restless, pacing in the shadows. For the men inside, this sight alone was enough to make their blood run cold. They were not dealing with a lone animal, nor a mother with cubs. They were surrounded by a horde, wild, starving, and unpredictable. But hunger grows. And when hunger festers inside beasts of such magnitude, restraint evaporates. The line that separates curiosity from aggression finally broke one dreadful day when 2 guards, men tasked with protecting the camp, were targeted. The bears, no longer satisfied with scraps, attacked them with a violence beyond imagination. The workers who witnessed it from the safety of their cabins never forgot the nightmare. They saw with their own eyes the moment when living men, breathing, shouting, fighting, were brought down by claws and teeth. The air filled with the sound of terror, screams mixed with guttural roars, the crash of bodies against the frozen ground, the snapping of bones beneath crushing jaws. Then, suddenly, silence. A heavy, oppressive silence that hung like a suffocating fog. The workers could not leave the safety of their cabins, could not help their fellow men. All they could do was listen to the fading cries and watch helplessly as their companions were torn apart. Within minutes, the bears dragged what was left of them into the brush. Human life had been reduced to nothing more than meat, consumed without pause. What remained of the guards was hardly recognizable as human. Later, only patches of blood-stained snow, fragments of bone, and tattered shreds of uniforms were recovered. The bears had devoured the men as if they had been preyed upon in the wild, no different from a deer or elk. The sight haunted those who survived inside the camp. They stayed hidden for days, peering out from windows, too terrified to step into the open air. They whispered among themselves, fully aware that stepping outside meant certain death. The bears remained, sprawling like a menacing army around the perimeter, grunting, growling, and pressing against the fences. Each night became a torment. The workers would hear the crunch of paws in the snow, the heavy breathing of beasts drawing near, and the guttural snarls that pierced the darkness. Every sound felt like a knock from death itself, every echo a reminder of the thin wall that separated them from the jaws of the monsters outside. Their supplies were limited. Food, water, and hope dwindled with each passing hour. Time itself slowed into an agonizing wait, where daylight offered no safety, and nightfall only deepened the horror. Eventually, word of the siege reached state authorities. A helicopter was dispatched with armed hunters and officials, their arrival breaking the standoff. Gunfire echoed through the wilderness as several bears were brought down, their bodies collapsing into the snow. The rest scattered, retreating into the forests. The camp was freed from its living nightmare, but freedom came at a cost. The 2 guards who had been the first victims were never returned to their families in any whole form. Their deaths remained marked only by stains in the snow, broken bones, and scraps of fabric. The site of the attack told its own gruesome story. Investigators found the northern part of the camp stained red with blood, the ground torn apart with drag marks, paw prints, and deep claw impressions. The evidence showed without doubt that this had not been the work of one or two animals. More than 30 different sets of tracks were identified, proof of a collective slaughter. Near the place where the first body had been dragged, there was a pool of frozen blood, fragments of limbs, an arm bone, a femur, and the shredded remains of a uniform. The bones bore clear marks of teeth, crushed and gouged by the jaws of large carnivores. Nearby, the second guard's remains were even more fragmented. A blood-soaked glove, a single boot, sections of vertebrae. On the ground were tufts of skin and scraps of muscle that had been torn away. Close to these grisly fragments, a rifle was discovered, its stock broken and smeared with blood. It was a weapon that had been raised in desperation, but against the sheer numbers and power of the attackers, it had become nothing more than a useless piece of wood and steel. Scattered across the ground were clothing remnants, broken gear, and debris flung in every direction. The survivors described the moment of the attack in harrowing detail. Both guards had been ambushed by several bears at once. The sight was too brutal to comprehend. More than 24 beasts swarming in unison, dragging down men who struggled and screamed until their cries were cut short. Bones cracked audibly, flesh was ripped, and the frenzy of growls and roars drowned everything else. The men inside the camp could do nothing but watch as their comrades were consumed before their eyes. The bodies were torn into pieces, dragged in different directions, and feasted upon as if the bears had been waiting for this moment all along. The psychological scars left by those days did not fade. Many of the workers later confessed that even years after the attack, they could not close their eyes without reliving the images: the crimson snow, the torn uniforms, the monstrous jaws of the beasts. In their nightmares, the silence after the screams was worse than the violence itself, because it reminded them of how quickly life had been extinguished. This incident became more than just a tragedy. It was a brutal reminder of nature's power and humanity's fragility. When the delicate balance of ecosystems collapses, when hunger drives predators past their natural limits, even man becomes fair game. In that moment, all of humanity's defenses, walls, weapons, and courage are stripped away, and the thin boundary that separates the hunter from the hunted disappears. Kamchatka remembers 2008, not only as a year of horror, but also as a warning. The camp, the blood-stained snow, the bones gnawed by teeth, they all stand as a testament to the truth that in the wilderness, man is not master, but intruder. And when nature strikes back, when the beast within is unchained by hunger, human life becomes as fragile as the flicker of a candle in the storm. For those who lived through it, the memories remain sharper than any blade. They remember the eyes of the bears gleaming in the night, the smell of blood that clung to the air, the helplessness of watching their protectors devoured alive. The tragedy was not only in the loss of life, but in the realization that civilization, when placed against the raw hunger of nature, is paper thin. No lock, no gun, no plan was enough. In those days of terror, they understood fully. The wilderness takes what it wants, and when balance is broken, man is nothing more than prey.